Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 6. In the last episode, we managed to finish building our oil refinery, and today we will finally manage to lay out our coal power plants. We've been missing some crucial buildings necessary for the final setup, mostly the cooling towers. We are still going to miss the low pressure turbines, but we can just leave a space for them in the power plant layout, and plug them in once they are unlocked. Apart from those, it will be a relatively chill episode. We will just mostly try to make sure we don't fall into any potholes along the way toward new technologies. At the end of the last episode, we managed to place a couple conveyor belts around the factories, so trucks don't need to move certain goods around in the bigger complex so much, freeing them up to do other things around the island. We can continue that by adding another belt, this time moving Tier 2 construction parts to the Tier 3 factory input warehouse. To ensure that trucks can still drive through without issues, we should try to leave at least 3 spaces between conveyor pillars. That's the minimum amount of space needed to let vehicles through. Okay, that's the Tier 2 parts deliveries handled. Since the belt that's moving electronics to the Tier 2 factories looks a bit sparse, I feel like we should increase that particular production. Let's build 2 more factories for it. While messing around with the belts, I also noticed that the copper warehouse looks a bit empty. I have a suspicion about the cause, but let's make sure. Yep. The rain harvesters are completely empty. The thing is, on average, they should give us about 3.5 water units per minute, but that's a bit of an estimate based on rainfall. And the electrolysis process needed to refine the impure copper takes 6 units per minute. Since we have 2 of those buildings, I doubled the harvesters to make sure we run them continuously. I also wasn't happy with the rate of iron production. For that one, our bottleneck was the speed of the belts feeding the furnaces. So I bumped the Tier 2 conveyors up the research list. Next, we still need to give the oil refinery a steady supply of water, so I decided to take care of it with a simple desalination setup. We already put some considerable strain on the nearby groundwater reservoir with those pumps for the farms, and I didn't want to press our luck. Nice and compact. Just the way I like it. Although I think we might need to raise that water pipe up a little, so trucks can pass through to the tower if needed. Yep, they are stuck at the vehicle assembly. Let's just do it, it's a level 1 pipe anyway, so it's cheap. Raising it to level 2 is enough to allow passage. And this is where my mild OCD got the better of me. I really wanted the cargo dock to be perfectly lined up with the refinery, so I decided to move it just by a tiny bit. In case you're new, you might notice that the dock's footprint is bigger than the actual building. That's because we will be able to upgrade it later, and that extra space is where the upgrade will go. In this position, it is perfectly centered with the current buildings. The storage tanks, however, those are temporary, so I didn't bother with the perfect positions for those. We will unlock the really big tanks in the future, and I will worry about positioning those. In the last episode, I narrowed the copper mining a bit, but forgot to start digging it down to level 1. Time to fix that error. I want to be as close to sea level as possible without flooding the pit, so we can place the retaining walls as deeply as possible. Oh, right. That's the wrong kind of designation. Maybe choosing a slightly different shade of green for the leveling designation was not the best choice. It's way too similar to the dumping zone color. That should do it. Now, here's the thing. Yes, at this point, we are ready to start using the oil refinery, and that is amazing news. But, to be honest, I would prefer to use up that small oil deposit at the edge of the island we've been using until now, just so we can get rid of that setup. To help with this, I told the refinery diesel storage to only allow pickups at priority 10, while leaving the original at priority 9. That should help us use that first. And at this point, we are just about managed to use half of that deposit, so we still have some ways to go before it's all used up. Anyways, I have some good news. We just managed to unlock the cooling towers. They can take in the different kinds of steams, and condense half of them back into usable water. This means that once we used up the steam's potential for generating energy, we can run the depleted gas through the towers, and reclaim half of the overall water used. This basically cuts the water usage of power plants in half. So, it's time to start planning out the final coal power plant setup we will use for the rest of the series. Well, at least until we can make nuclear power, which is pretty far away at this point. You might have noticed that I left a space open along the power shaft. That's where the low pressure turbine will go. For that, we need tier 3 research, and we are not quite there yet, so I just left it open for the time when we do have it. Oh, yeah. We also ran out of workers, so I quickly expanded the town, and turned the beacon back on. And here we go again. Just like with the refinery, we have some piping to do. Since we don't have the low pressure turbines, I will just pass the pipes through the empty slot. Basically, the first turbines will turn high pressure steam into low pressure, and then, the last turbine will turn that into depleted steam, which will then go through the cooling towers, and the reclaimed water will feed back into the boilers. As you can see, I like to keep my setup as narrow as physically possible. That's just a compulsion of mine. You see those thicker grid lines? I like to have 2 of these power shaft assemblies inside one of those. No real reason, I just feel bad if I can't fit them in. Of course, we need a pipe balancer at the boiler. It's needed to make sure we use the reclaimed water before we let any more in from outside sources. I wonder if I can do this slightly differently. The fact that the flywheel isn't connected to the high pressure turbines is a bit of a flaw in the system. Well, we cannot fit it in where the low pressure turbine would go, the pipes are still in the way. Let's see what we can do near the boiler, so let's move the assembly over a bit. Got to love the planning tools of this game. They are extremely easy to use, and speeds up these kinds of experimental moments quite a bit. No, I don't think this will work. We need to fit that pipe balancer in somehow, and the flywheel takes up too much space. And we still haven't built the coal storage yet either. This will simply not work. Let's just put the flywheel in the middle. This will ensure that the high pressure turbines can use it as a kinetic energy storage along the power shaft, and then we can still hook up the low pressure turbine when it becomes available. Yeah. This should work. Uh-oh, we are already on level 4 with the pipe that goes over the flywheel. And I really want to avoid building this out any wider than this. Well, not much we can do about it. The only saving grace is that there will be no pipe nodes along the line going around the flywheel, so we might still be able to tile this setup twice into a single big grid. I think we are pretty much done with the pipes at this point. Not perfect, but it will do quite nicely. We still need the coal input for the boiler. Yeah, I think it's going to serve us quite well until we get nuclear power. Time to see if we can tile two of them into a big grid. Yep, we sure can. There are no connection conflicts between the two separate assemblies, so they will operate independently from each other. Next, we need to sort out the water. Since we managed to cut the water usage in half, a single groundwater pump will be able to satisfy both power plants. I didn't want to build a conveyor line for the temporary power plant, but for this one, we absolutely should. And would you look at that, we can easily run the belt above the pipe. Very nice. Wait. Is that a Tier 2 conveyor? I only noticed that we unlocked them when I saw those small blue lines along the belts. Very nice indeed. Not really necessary, but we might as well upgrade the pipes to level 2. I think it looks a bit nicer if they are all the same size and color. And at this point, there is no reason to keep the old power plant around. Time to reclaim some construction parts. Well, it's time for the final inspection. We need to make sure everything goes where it should, check that all pipes are facing the right way, all that jazz. Yeah, I think we can unpause all the remaining constructions. Next, I like to set up a bit of a priority chain along the power shaft in my power plants. I find that it can help with regulating steam consumption. Basically, we start from the beginning, and set the generators a descending set of priorities, starting with 1. This will ensure that the power load is split between the assemblies equally, and we'll make sure that setting one of the turbines to the auto balance mode actually works for a longer time. If the priorities were determined by build order, then the first assembly would receive all the power demand before the second one would be turned on. At least that's my reasoning. I'm sure it could be balanced much better to minimize fuel consumption, but it worked for me so far. Also, why is it not working now? We are back to using the diesel generators. Something's wrong. Ah, the pipe under the coal belt is facing the wrong way. Now that's more like it. The last thing we need is for our power to be cut off. And it was a textbook example why we should never get rid of the diesel generators. If anything ever happened to our coal power plants, then it's very important to have a backup source of electricity. Oops, we managed to reach the end of the iron mine, and smelting came to a halt. Better start mining ASAP, or our lack of maintenance will be a big problem. Okay, I think these guys should focus on mining iron if possible. And to expedite the raw iron deliveries, we should upgrade the belts to Tier 2. The throughput of the belts was also a big bottleneck until now, so it's about time. It will take some time to catch up with the construction parts. The Tier 1s need iron plates to make, and we need to fill up the maintenance setup first. Let's give it some time. At least the Tier 2 belts are much faster than the old ones, so once the mining catches up to the furnaces, we should see fully saturated belts. To take care of the last tutorial objectives, we should start bringing in crude oil from the oil rig. Since the diesel storage is set to a lower priority than the old one, it will simply fill up, and then things will stop. So the worst things that will happen is that we use some of the workers at the rig unnecessarily. While we wait for the iron production to catch up to the backlog, how about we take care of the biodiesel? We've been stockpiling the fuel gas for quite a while, so we should turn it into diesel. For that, we just need an air separator for the oxygen, and of course a cracking unit, which will do the actual work. Unlike the air separator we had at the steel setup, this one only needs to generate the O2, so we can safely vent out the nitrogen, and we can allow the oxygen to back up. It won't hurt anything. As you can see, the cracking unit creates diesel, and water as a byproduct. I think we can safely feed that water into the refinery. As for the diesel, it will just go into a storage tank. The refinery is a bit far away, so we might as well let the pipe run on level 3 all the way, so we don't block the trucks anywhere. I think the trucks can still reach far enough to drop the vegetables off into the warehouse, so this should be okay. I feel it would make sense to add in a pipe balancer for this one. I would like to avoid clogging up the biodiesel setup if I can, so we should use the water from that before we use the desalinator. Yeah, that will do nicely. And once we start stripping the sulfur and ammonia from the sour water, we can feed that back into this balancer too. We have enough ports left. Now, to keep the biodiesel processing going, I set the diesel storage for that one to priority 8. Ideally, it should just be a trickle of fuel anyway. Also, the maintenance bar above the resource tracker shows a healthy green bar, so we managed to avert disaster. The other iron storages should start filling up soon. At this point, I see no reason not to give the mechanical parts their own output warehouse too. Well, damn. We managed to overpopulate. This is what happens if I don't keep an eye on the number of people, and I keep the beacon on for too long. Time to build yet another housing district. At this point, we managed to research the first sets of weapons and armor for the flagship. To be able to make the upgrade, we need to repair completely, so I just turned on the automatic repairs. If we ever come back damaged, it will be done for us. Now, to take care of the last remaining tutorial objectives, we need to do 2 things. Burn a little bit of light and heavy oil in the flares. We can do this by redirecting the pipe balancers until the objectives are completed, and then resetting them to the intended settings. And we're done. The last tutorials were about the refinery, and the importing of resources from the nodes on the world map. From here on out, we are completely on our own. And it seems the pollution managed to catch up to us. A simple cold going through the settlement is enough to plunge us into negative health. I suspect the biggest culprit is the sour water. It's really nasty stuff, so dumping it all into the sea is a bit much. Good thing it's temporary, since we only had a single big rush in the refinery. Once the diesel tank is full, it should stop. Alright. I can see some healthy looking warehouses around the factories. I think we are more or less back to normal. Well, maybe we could make a bit more mechanical parts. That one is a bit lacking. And you know what? We have a lot of tier 3 construction parts. We can justify upgrading all the belts in the factory district to level 2. Same for the maintenance setup. In fact, we could upgrade the storages too. I didn't want to set up alerts until we had these. It's much easier to fall below 50% with smaller warehouses, but with bigger ones, it should be okay. First, we need to give appropriate names for the storages. Without renaming them, they would simply show up as a nondescript name in the alert. If we label them according to their stored products, and their approximate position on the island, then we will know where the problems are. And then, we can set alerts on them. We can either ask it to let us know if it starts to go above or below a certain threshold. Since we want to keep these warehouses full, we should tell them to alert us if their stocks fall below, let's say, 50%. And once we set up one side, we can just copy the building setting over to the other set of warehouses. And it's already working. We set them to send an alert at 50%. Since the upgraded warehouses have double the storage capacity as the small ones, we immediately start getting alerts, which will go away as soon as they start getting filled up again. And the alerts give us all the information we need. We named the storages as maintenance, since they are meant to supply the depots, and that's the name that shows in the notification, and tells us what's missing exactly. We will do these kinds of alerts all over the place as we go on. For example, I would like to have one for the different mines. That would be really helpful. Now, in the last episode, I said that upgrading the food markets will let us set 4 different foods to be distributed. That was an error on my part. It's actually 2. And speaking of food, increasing the population resulted in the current farms not being able to satisfy the demand. Unfortunately, we need more at this point. In the future, I will likely move the vehicle depot and the brickworks to make room for even more fields, but these 2 will tide us over for now. Nice, the ramp is almost done. I wanted to see if maybe we could sell the bricks we make in one of the other settlements, but no luck. But I know there are others still hiding behind those question marks. And just to make sure we can actually keep exploring without much trouble, I decided it's time to upgrade the ship. It's a bit of a hefty investment, so it will take some time to deliver everything needed for the upgrade, but it will be well worth it. We managed to fall below 50% on the local oil deposit. With the acceleration of the fuel consumption on the island, it shouldn't take long to deplete it now. And we are struggling to get rid of the slag from the furnaces again. Well, our logistics are stable, so it should be dealt with promptly. Yeah, there. We have trucks coming to empty them out. That coal mine looks a bit too empty for my liking. Time to add more excavators to it. And this is what will help us empty out the oil deposit at an ever-increasing rate. We keep adding more vehicles, increasing diesel consumption. Looking at the notifications, the fact that the rubber alerts are still not gone is a bit worrying. Maybe we should move the rubber plant away from the current position, and put it next to the refinery. Something to consider for the next episode. But look! The ramp is done. I think it's time to start using this place as a dedicated stone quarry at this point. There should be quite a bit of stone we can carve out of these cliffs, so how about we do just that? That will do for now. We should get a bit of extra terraforming medium out of this. Nice, only the last coal storage is left to complete the double power plants. Well, it seems it will take a while to deliver all the iron needed to finish the ship upgrades. We need over 700 units, and we barely managed 20 so far. Settle in, this will be a long one. And looking at the furnaces, the bottleneck is coal at this point. Time to increase the mining output. What I do now is a bit risky. Digging around the ramps will of course cause landslides, and if the material is loose enough, it can flow so much that it makes the ramp impossible to navigate. That's why I only dug 3 tiles in. But, I've decided that maybe it's time to start thinking about retaining walls, and for that, we need nice clean edges. At least for the way I like to do it. "40 iron plates delivered. This will take a while. And we just got bio-waste collection for the settlement. That will come in handy later, but it's not really necessary right now. But more importantly, we also got recycling. That's a bit more exciting. At a certain point, we can start collecting a bunch of useful rubbish from the town and other buildings, and run them through this recycling plant. At the other end, it will start giving us different materials we can reuse. Remember that abandoned communications tower at the very start of the series? We got iron scrap from it, right? Well, we will get the same kind of scrap from the recycling plant, but not just iron, but copper, glass, etc. It's a great way to cut down on unnecessary waste. I also decided that digging back 3 tiles in the coal mine might be a bit much, so I pulled it back to 2 tiles instead. And I think that's where we will leave it for today. We managed to sort out the power plants, and by adding 2 more diggers to the coal mine, it should bounce back fairly quickly. I don't want to make any plans for the next video just yet, I just need to see what get unlocked next, and act accordingly. We will absolutely need to set up recycling, that's a given, but apart from that, we will just go with what gets researched. I suspect that sour water stripping should be fairly close, so that's a possibility, but we can also consider the next tier of vehicles currently being developed. The only thing we cannot make for them is glass at the moment, but we should be able to trade for that once we find the settlement that sells it. Upgrading our current fleet will be a huge jump in efficiency to say the least. Anyways, thank you for watching. If you liked the video, then leaving a like and subscribing to the channel just might motivate me to make more. If you are more in the donating mood, you can find a link to my Ko-fi page in the description, where you can buy me a glass of water. I don't really drink coffee. Thank you for your support, and until next time, I will see you later.